Hi, good evening. My name is Gloria Anderson, and I'm from Colleen Lake. Currently, I am a council member for Bigstone Nation, but I am also a direct descendant of Jean Baptiste Gambler, and my grandma is her name was Adelaide Giroux. My grandparents' name is Peter Machimuta Gambler. And my grandma, her name is Adelaide Giroux. And my parents are Raymond Gladue, and my mother's name is Mary Gladue Gambler. I was born on the Jean Baptiste Gambler Reserve, and I guess my purpose of doing this interview is more on I'm really interested in learning more about my history on my great grandfather's side at this time. I believe if you, for me anyway, it's more of learning about my own identity and where I come from. And I also believe um, that's where your healing starts, when you know who you are and where you come from. And for me, this is the start of my journey, of my own healing journey. And I believe in collecting my history. This will also hopefully help my own children, my own grandchildren, and my great-grandchildren, and anyone who is a descendant of Jean Baptiste Gambler. This is a birth certificate of my my grandfather, Peter Machimuta Gambler. He was born January 1st, 1906. And my grandma, her name was Marie Caroline Gambler. And her parents were Benjamin Cardinal and Sophie LaPowder or Powder. And she was born on July 3rd, 1915. My grandparents, Peter Gambler and Caroline Cardinal, were married on June 6, 1932. And these are my mother's parents, my mother Mary's parents. This is a picture of my grandpa. That was his treaty card way back when, before we became Bigstone Nation members. Um, I have a picture of my grandmother Caroline, and as well as my grandmothers, who are my grandpa's sisters, Margaret Gambler and Helen Auger and Mary Jane Pichet. And I had the privilege of seeing them. I also had the honor and privilege of meeting my great grandmother Adelaide when she was alive. I did not get to see my great grandpa Jean Baptiste Gambler while he was alive. On June 21st, 2025, we are going to have a Jean Baptiste gathering, and it's going to be our first time honoring and celebrating our grandfather, great grandfather, Jean Baptiste Gambler. And I'm hoping a lot of the family members will be attending. I'm really proud of my history, and I think that I want to preserve it, and I want to write it down, our own history. And I think it's really important to have our own stories written, our own history. We have a proud history, because sometimes this world is changing, memories fade, you tend to forget, and I think it's important all that information be documented for for our children to learn their history. And I think these type of stories need to be told at schools, because it is our history, and it should be told by us because we lived it, we know it, we're here. And at the same time, it's also part of a healing journey for many people. I believe you have to know your history to heal your traumas in life. And for me, that's my whole goal in this, is to tell our story our way and how we seen it. Thank you.
Hello, Danse. My name's Curtis Cardinal. I'm from Calling Lake. Today is June 16th, 2025. Today I'll be talking a little bit about my ancestor, John Baptiste Gambler, Machimota. He was my third great grandfather. I'll be discussing a little bit of the history, um, and to the family tree and different things like that. The first thing I want to discuss is the Indian Claims Commission, Bigstone Cree Nation inquiry for the TLE, that's Treaty Land Entitlement. It was dated March 2000. They did some research on the JB Jean Baptiste Gambler Indian Reserve 183. Says the final addition to the Bigstone Cree Nation land base was a 507.5 acre parcel of land at Calling Lake, set apart for the First Nation in 1966. While advising that this reserve belongs to Bigstone, elders confirmed that it originally had been for one family, that of Jean Baptiste Gambler. The daughters of Jean Baptiste Gambler advised the commission that their father had been born at Lac La Biche, and his father, Louisan Machimuta, was a signatory to Treaty 6 as a headsman of the Piesis Lac La Biche band at Fort Pitt on September 9th, 1876. Jean Baptiste Gambler moved to Calling Lake at some time before the birth of most of his children. In fact, probably before 1899. The Machimuta Gambler family was absent from the Lac La Biche on a consistent basis as early as 1880. And Piesis band annuity pay lists indicate that the family was living within the boundaries of Treaty 8 as early as 1883. In a statutory declaration sworn in 1915, Jean Baptiste Gambler indicated that he had wintered in Calling Lake area since 1885. Members of the Machimata Gambler family were virtually the only Piesis band members who did not discharge from treaty in order to apply for scrip in 1886. And in 1911, Louisan Machimata and Jean Baptiste Gambler transferred to Bigstone Cree Nation, becoming numbers 104 and 105 respectively. Both families were absent in 1913, the year in which reserves were first surveyed in Wabasca. In 1915, Jean Baptiste Gambler applied for a free grant to a 2 square mile parcel of land at Calling Lake, claiming that he had been in possession of the land claimed and he had made improvements on it prior to signing of Treaty 8. Although the form of the application made by him was that usually made in the homestead application. Jean Baptiste Gambler noted in his statutory declaration that following consultations with the Treaty 8 inspector, he claimed the land in question as a reserve for his family. The Department of Indian Affairs supported Jean Baptiste Gambler's application. However, somewhat surprisingly, in light of the fact that the application was made on behalf of the Gambler family, the department calculated the land to which the family was entitled under the reserve rather than the severalty provision of Treaty 8. For reasons not expressed, Indian Affairs advised the Department of the Interior in January 1919 that the 11 members of the of the Gambler family required a reserve of only 1 square mile. When the parcels of land specified by Indian Affairs was surveyed, some of it was found to be under the waters of Calling Lake. And the order in council setting aside the Indian Reserve 183 in severalty for Jean Baptiste Gambler family established the size of the reserve as 507.5 acres. Jean Baptiste Gambler lived on the Indian Reserve 183 until his death, and his family grew. A 1939 survey revealed that 24 Bigstone Cree Nation members lived on the reserve. He had made several unsuccessful applications for additional reserve land. In 1966, a decade after his death, the Bigstone Cree Nation passed a Band Council resolution asking that Indian Reserve 183 be set aside for the First Nation. And Superintendent of the Lesser Slave Lake Agency endorsed this suggestion, noting the long affiliation of Jean Baptiste Gambler with the Bigstone Cree Nation and the support of, it says, unanimous support of the Gambler descendants for the proposal. According to the order in council passed on December 22nd, 1966, set aside the Jean Baptiste Gambler Reserve for the use and benefit of the Wabasca Bigstone Band of Indians. Surviving children of Jean Baptiste Gambler remember the events of 1960 somewhat differently. They advised the commission that their father was affiliated with Bigstone only for the purpose of annuity payments, and they have no recollection of signing any papers consenting to the order in council. So that's what the Indian Claims Commission reported. A little bit about my family tree. My great-grandmother, Teresa Gambler, her father was Joseph Gambler, and Joseph Gambler's father was Jean Baptiste Gambler. And then Jean Baptiste Gambler is father, according to the family tree that I have here. His father was, let's see, Louisan Machimota, and then Louisan's father was Muscomé Capaver, and that's who I have on the for his grandfather on the family tree. And they were all from the Pieces band in Treaty 6. And this is a replica that I'm wearing of a medal, of a Treaty 6 medal. It's just a replica of 1876 as Indian Treaty Number 6, because that's where they're from, the Lac La Biche area. And that's where they had lived, in the Lac La Biche region before coming to the Calling Lake area. And a little more history I want to read. This here is from the book. This book is called By a Lake of Sparkling Blue, A History of Calling Lake School. It was by Dora Shawaga. I'm just going to go to page 9 and read a little bit here, a little bit about the history. It says on page 9, there was really no permanent settlement at Calling Lake in 1920. People occupied a scattered area. There were some people living to the north, but both on and beyond the Indian Reserve, which was established because Jean Baptiste Gambler requested it. His Indian name was Machimota. That's Muchmato. And people also called him the Old Chief, Sapachis, or Sammy Gambler. He and his wife, Adele, had been married at Calling Lake by the Reverend J.B. Grok, OMI, in 1903, and they came back with their family in 1906. to live at Colin Lake on the land now known as the Jean Baptiste Gambler Indian Reserve number 183. The land had been set apart in severalty by an order in council in April 1919 for the use of the family of Jean Baptiste Gambler. The reserve covered 1 square mile, section 30, township 73, range 21, west of the 4th meridian. There was also people living along the shore of the Calling Lake, but only as far as the Collin River. There also was no one living to the south beyond the Collin River in 1920. Now, another thing that I want to read is this one was from the elders of Calling Lake and Chippewan, February 6, 1997. These are statements from the elders, a number of elders who have made statements. And I'm just going to read a little bit about on the one page here. It has a little bit about the elders. They were asked about, it says the elders were asked to describe the history of Jean Baptiste Gambler Reserve. Alec Gambler, the son of Jean Baptiste, who lives on what is known as the Jean Baptiste Gambler Reserve, described how his father, in his first marriage, had 4 sons, Alphonse, Arsenine, Joseph, and Alexander. When when Jean Baptiste remarried, his second wife mothered Alec and his sister Mary Jane. The second wife had 17 children, one of whom was a younger Joseph. This Joseph was never married, and he died as a young man. The elders from Jean Baptiste Gambler Reserve were asked why the reserve was so small with such a large family. Alec Gambler explained that at the time they were promised the reserve, his father had told the surveyors that there were 2 families, Jean Baptiste and his father, and that at the time they were promised more land as the family increased. There was other people trying to get the reserve. A family of Chippewas had tried to build a home on the same land when Jean Baptiste arrived. These people moved to Fort McMurray. Elders were asked their understanding of how the reserve became a part of Bigstone. Alec and Mary Jane Gambler explained that eventually they had no leader and the reserve had to be administered from Bigstone. Neil Reddicoff produced a letter dated in 1960s from the department explaining that the Indian agent had visited the surviving children of Jean Baptiste in 1965 and asked their permission to transfer the reserve to Bigstone. Neither Alec or Mary Jane Gambler, 2 of the surviving children, recall being asked these questions. Footnote 190 of his research report. And we also have another elder stating here, Agathe Gambler, widow of Moise, explaining that the people of Calling Lake had a reserve between Wandering River and Agnes Lake on the east bank of the Athabasca River. This reserve was to have belonged to the Jean Baptiste family. They eventually abandoned this reserve, and when they moved near Calling Lake, where the reserve was surveyed. That's a little bit of the history there. And some other history I want to talk about is in 1952, Jean Baptiste Gambler went to Athabasca for the Athabasca Bridge opening. There's photos of that in the Athabasca archives. Also in 1901, Jean Baptiste traveled to Calgary to meet the Duke and Duchess of York, who later became the King of England. And there was a gathering of 2,500 First Nations people and chiefs in Calgary to meet the Duke of York. And all of the headsmen were presented medals, and all the minor chiefs were also presented medals at the time in 1901. So Jean Baptiste was presented that medal by the Duke of York in Calgary in 1901. So that's a little bit of the history of Jean Baptiste Gambler. And also, another thing I would like to mention is the people had been working on land claims throughout the years, like treaty land entitlement for many years, many different people. And in the year 2010, Bigstone signed a treaty land entitlement. And in there, they've got an additional 40 square miles of additional reserve land in 4 locations. There will be some at the Collin River towards Looking Glass. There'll be some land over there. And also on the south end of Calling Lake, past the provincial park, there's some land. And also on the north side of Calling Lake and at Rock Island. So altogether, it's 40 square miles of additional reserve land. And also that Bigstone received 2 positions on council as a part of that agreement with settling the land claim in 2010. So hopefully all that land will be transferred over soon. So that's a little bit of the history of the reserve. And this is also a picture here. I have him. This was actually taken in 1952 at the Athabasca Bridge opening. That's Jean Baptiste Gambler sitting down there with his bow and arrow and the headdress. And you can see the Athabasca Bridge in the background there. That's just up the hill. So I thought I would show that. But also have other photos. I'll show later on a photo of the current reserve land selections I'll be showing here during the video. And so that's a little bit of the history that we know, and we're still researching and trying to find out more information about the history of the reserve. The Power of the Indian Agent, the story behind the 1935 letter by Todd Lamoureux, October 2nd, 2014. This is from APTN News. I'm going to read this article. It says, Curtis Cardinal says it surprised him how a 75-year-old document became viral. Last July, he posted a 1935 letter from the Indian agent N.P.L. LaRue to Cardinal's great-great-great-grandfather Jean Baptiste. In it, LaRue writes, J.H. McIntosh, who owned the general store near Calling Lake. He tells McIntosh to withhold Cardinal's rations until he sends his children to the Wabasca residential school. Yesterday, APTN Investigates posted the letter on its Facebook page and has been shared over 460 times and garnered more than 60 comments. The response that the story prompted Cardinal to call APTN and tell us more about the letter. The guy who was the storekeeper had an old shed, and it was sitting in the old shed since 1935. That letter all rolled up, said Cardinal. McIntosh left his land to his daughter, but when she passed away without children, the land was inherited by her good friend Gwen Schmidt. And she was digging around and she found that old letter rolled up, and she brought it to me at the office this July and said, look what I found. Cardinal is a supervisor at the Calling Lake Visitor Information Center and has a keen interest in history in this community, named after Gambler. He immediately knew the importance of the letter, so I scanned it and I uploaded it to Facebook. He said, so it's been sitting in the shed, that letter, since 1935. Also found in the shed was a headdress. The same one Gambler can be seen wearing in this picture taken in 1952. However, Cardinal isn't sure how it ended up in the shed of a long-deceased storekeeper. Cardinal said it couldn't have been easy decision to risk not sending his children to the school. That was during the Depression. If you were cut off from your rations, it was a pretty tough times. Cardinal told APTN that Gambler had many children over his long life, perhaps as many as 24 before he passed away in 1957. Cardinal speculates that his great-great-grandfather may have not sent his children to residential school. A lot of them could not read. So the letter, it says here, I'll just kind of read a little bit of the letter and that was found, like the actual letter. It says on here, it says, Office of the Indian Agent, Drift Pile, July 24th, 1935, Department of Indian Affairs. Dear Sir, last winter, J.B. Gambler, an Indian of Calling Lake, has taken his children away from the Wabasca RC school without the assent of the principal, and when the magistrate, acting as truant officer, went to him to regain possession of the children, he used abusive language, threatening to shoot him. As the above mentioned, J.B. Gambler is in the receipt of a monthly ration. I have to order that the same be cut off entirely until such time as I am able to reverse my decision. This cannot be expected until the children are back in school at Wabasca and Gambler amends amends presented to the principal and magistrate there. Your account dated the 7th of July is being passed as submitted. Yours faithfully, NP LaRue, Indian Agent, and the J.H. McIntosh, Esquire, Calling Lake, Alberta. This jacket here is a logo that was made years ago. When my late uncle Clifford Cardinal, he was on the Bigstone Cree Nation Council for Calling Lake, and he made a logo for Calling Lake when we were under when Chief Oj Panasquas was the chief. They had made a logo during that time, and he had made this logo, and it says Jean Baptiste Gambler, Reserve 183, Bigstone Cree Nation, Calling Lake, and Bigstone. The current Bigstone logo has one teepee, but the two teepees represent Calling Lake and Bigstone, like together under one nation. So this was a logo that they had used years ago, and this jacket. He had made some jackets, and I got one of the jackets. So I had this from years ago. Before my uncle had passed on, they had made some flags as well. So there was a number of flags that were made, and about this logo. So that was made when they were on the Bigstone Cree Nation Council. They made a logo. So that's just the logo. I just want to show everyone how that looks. Thank you. And yeah, so thank you for listening, and have a good day.